Today we'll be covering the SWTOR 7.2 Gunslinger, Saboteur, and Sniper Engineering. My choice for this is because the mobility that this advanced class has to offer gives it a little bit of an edge over the other two, and mobility can be quite a key factor to take a note of in the utility in certain fights. It still has great DPS. Single target DPS is amazing. Its AoE is amazing without having to do much different. So the abilities of the main class, the Gunslinger Saboteur is going to use Shock Charge, Target Hack, Explosive Charge, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, Sabotage, Vital Shot, Thermal Grenade, Bombing Run, Quick Draw, Charge Burst. On the Sniper Engineering inside, it's Interrogation Probe, Targeting Systems, Explosive Probe, Series of Shots, Plasma Probe, EMP Discharge, Corrosive Dart, Fragmentation Grenade, Orbital Strike, Takedown, and Snipe. The main rotation for the Gunslinger Saboteur, the Shock Charge only needs to be applied when you're switching targets or you're getting back onto a new target that doesn't have Shock Charge anymore. We'll discuss how that can be determined. But the main rotation goes Target Hack whenever available, Explosive Charge, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, Sabotage, Vital Shot, Thermal Grenade, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, and then you have a choice of three depending on where you are in the fight. Quick Draw, Bombing Run, or Charge Burst. By default it's going to be Charge Burst, and then the last is going to be Thermal Grenade by default or Bombing Run depending on what you chose in the last two. For the Sniper Engineer, the Interrogation Probe only goes on when it's not on the target. Targeting System, Explosive Probe, Series of Shot, Plasma Probe, EMP Discharge, Corrosive Dart, Fragmentation Grenade, Series of Shots, Plasma Probe, and then you have an option of Takedown, Orbital Strike, Snipe, and then the last ability you have an option of Fragmentation Grenade, Orbital Strike. If the last two abilities confuse you about which rotation you should do, you can always go to the simple main rotation. It's not going to yield the top damage, but it's going to yield us a consistently good damage, and that's just changing the last two abilities on the Saboteur side to Charge Burst and Thermal Grenade. On the engineering side, that's Snipe and Fragmentation Grenade, and this is by default your main rotation. There's some options that you can play with the last two, but if you're confused about it, you can always just go to the simplified rotation. Your opening rotation, just to get started, is Bombing Run, Charge Burst, and then you jump into Shock Charge and then just go straight down the line for your normal rotation. For the Engineer, that's Orbital Strike, Snipe, and Interrogation Probe. That's just your opening sequence. The nice, if somebody counts you in, on the count of 2, you're going to do Bombing Run or Orbital Strike, and that starts you off. Your ability tree is going to look something like this. As you can see, I made some options that you can potentially go into. We'll discuss each of these. Line 43, you have to just consider in a certain unique situation, and line 27 as well. Both of these potentially could reduce the amount of DPS that you do, but you need to consider the utility of this. From line 64, 68, and 73, these are just depending on what style of play you need to do or what utility you need to have. Your tactical is Ruthless Interrogation. Your implant is Locked and Loaded Package. And the second implant is Energy Regulators Package. Here in the game, we're going to set up our layout sequence that we can just quickly cover. If you can see, I have this all duplicated from this list straight down on this bar. I have Shock Charge, Target Hack, Explosive Charge, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, then Sabotage, Vital Shot, Thermal Grenade, Bombing Run, Quick Draw, and Charge Burst. If we look at our main rotation, we can see that if we do our main rotation, we only apply a Shock Charge when it's not available on the target. We know that by looking at Sabotage. So Sabotage we can keep an eye on. If it's not lit up, we know we need to apply Shock Charge. So Shock Charge, Target Hack, Explosive Charge, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, Sabotage, Vital Shot, Thermal Grenade, back to Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, and then we either have a choice of Charge Burst, Quick Draw, Bombing Run. So let's do Charge Burst, and then Thermal Grenade or Bombing Run, and we're going to do Thermal Grenade. Okay, we'll get into these last abilities and how to do this, but you can see how the main rotation matches this. So I'm lighting up some key features here, and what I want you to notice is that in that main rotation, that whenever we have a speed shot in the rotation, we follow it with an incendiary grenade. These two are a pair, and I have them highlighted in yellow. So whenever we do a speed shot, we follow it by an incendiary grenade. And then Sabotage is our part of our first part of our rotation. So whenever we do speed shot, incendiary grenade on the first part of our rotation, we can look at Sabotage. If Sabotage is off cooldown, we know we're in the first part of our rotation, and we can just do the next three abilities. If we know that it's not on cooldown, we know we're in the second part of our rotation. And if you notice, I've outlined these second part in red. So we have a choice of one of these three abilities, and we'll discuss that in a second. And then we can come back to Thermal Grenade. Okay, the reason why this is that on that second last abilities, if we just consider the very last ability to be Thermal Grenade, it does a great amount of damage. If we look at that, it's just sub 20,000 with an additional damage to AoE targets. Bombing Run, really good AoE damage, does it over 9 seconds. And then Charge Burst, not that great, but if we don't have any other thing, it's a good filler. So we can, Quick Draw is only available once the target reaches below 30% health. So we can alternate between these two because of the cooldown of Bombing Run. So let's just start off a rotation and do it twice and see what it looks like if we follow this graphics. So Shock Charge, Target Hack, Explosive Charge, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, Sabotage, Vital Shot, Thermal Grenade, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, Bombing Run, Thermal Grenade, back to Explosive Charge, Speed Shot, our target hack wasn't available, Incendiary Grenade, Sabotage, Vital Shot, Thermal Grenade, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade. This time we're going to do burst, Charge Burst, Thermal Grenade, and back to Explosive Charge, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, Sabotage, Vital Shot, Thermal Grenade, Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, Bombing Run, Thermal Grenade, and we back now. So Explosive Charge is going to be at the start of each of our rotations, and that's going to be our indication that when that's available, we can go straight down the line up to Thermal Grenade. And then when we come back to Speed Shot, our queue is going to be back to the start, but we can see that Explosive Charge is not available. Then we do Speed Shot, Incendiary Grenade, and then this time we pick one of the three blast abilities and go back to a Thermal Grenade. That's a simplified one. Let's talk a little bit about the utility behind this. If Quick Draw becomes available, we don't have to go back to Thermal Grenade. We can do a Quick Draw Bombing Run if we want to, or a Quick Draw Thermal Grenade. And that is our real flexibility in the end. And the reason why we want to consider some of this has to do with this blazing speed. Blazing speed is a great DPS boost that is just built in there. Speed shot burns the target, dealing X amount of damage over 6 seconds. Stacks up to 3 times. Charge burst, quick draw, thermal grenade, apply 1 stack of blazing speed's effect. So, our speed shot, as we can see here, applies stacks. Our thermal grenade applies a stack and refreshes it. Charge burst applies a stack. And so does quick draw. So we just need every few abilities to have be one of these, and we'll be good. So when we get to that situation where we have to just fill in our rotation, that second last ability is going to be alternating between one of these two. Charge burst will refresh it if it is that case. Thermal grenade will refresh it. And so let's have a look at it. I'm just going to do a simplified quick rotation. Speed shot is going to put 3 stacks of that on. Energy grenade, sabotage. It's about to fall off, and there's our thermal grenade. If we were a little bit faster, we would have just refreshed it, and we go back to speed shot. Bombing run. Thermal grenade puts it back on. 3 stacks. Speed shot does it again. Incendiary grenade. And this charge burst will refresh that 3 stacks. So let's see here. There, it refreshed it. And we can do our speed shot again. So let's consider the situation where the last 2 abilities changes a little bit. If we do quick draw, that is going to be a little bit of a flexibility in our rotation. It will be available every other rotation, so it can replace charge burst in this setup. But the other thing to consider is that it also refreshes that speed shot, that blazing speed. So we could do quick draw bombing run or quick draw thermal grenade. And that's what we can alternate in that last rotation for more DPS, is that the last 2 abilities now become bombing run and thermal grenade once the target gets below 30%, and quick draw can be every rotation. So visually, just to think about it, is that we have everything pivoting on sabotage, and then once we see sabotage is available, we go 1 or 2 abilities more, come back to speed shot, incendiary grenade. Now we pick one of the last 2 abilities, and we can go from bombing run or quick draw or charge burst. We alternate between these 2 up until 30%, and then the last ability will be thermal grenade. Once we see quick draw lighting up, we go quick draw and one of these 2 abilities, and then back to our rotation. There is an exception to this, and we need to think about which abilities are AoE abilities. So since we're so good at AoE, we might want to change the last 2 abilities to bombing run, thermal grenade, and then the next time around quick draw thermal grenade, because thermal grenade has an AoE component to it. So if there's AoE damage to be done, instead of that quick draw bombing run, quick draw thermal grenade, we can always go bombing run thermal grenade, and then the next time quick draw thermal grenade. It's a little bit of a nuance. Those last 2 abilities is where you have to really think about it. The rest of the rotation is very simple. You can always fall back onto charge burst, thermal grenade as your main option. But if you want to really squeeze out a few little bit more AoE damage, think about those last 2 abilities and their priorities there. Keep in mind you have sweeping gunfire. It's an incredible amount of damage that can be done. The way that you would do this is that You need to think about all of your AoE abilities, which is Incendiary Grenade, which is a great AoE ability. Additional, you have Bombing Run and Sweeping Gunfire. So if you need to really get AoE out, just go down the line: Incendiary Grenade, Bombing Run, Sweeping Fire. And that combination is going to really pump out some AoE. You can skip the Thermal Grenade if you up for pressure. Thermal Grenade would be great if your targets are moving again and then have to reapply Sweeping Gunfire. But just keep in mind that Sweeping Gunfire is not sustainable. It uses a lot of energy. Initially it looks fine, but the longer you go, the more it does. Okay, let's look at some other features. This is why this class has some advantages of all of the gunslingers. So all of the abilities highlighted in green are accessible while moving, meaning that I can move and I can put on shock charge, I can do target hack, I can do explosive charge, incendiary grenade, sabotage, vital shot, thermal grenade. Okay, so I'm quite mobile. For all of the other abilities, I can stand, I don't have to be crouched. We'll talk about what crouch does for us. Bombing run, charge burst. So we don't actually need the crouch. There's no DPS benefit to it. What the benefit has to do with our energy regulators. You gain 1 energy per second while in cover. We will eventually start losing energy. We do have cool head, but if we want to do without energy regulators, we need to consider line 43 and potentially go with hot head. While sequence break is active, explosive charge and shock charge and incendiary grenade deal 10% more damage and generate 1 energy while dealing damage. This energy generation effect cannot occur more than once per second. So it works based off our target hack, and it sort of replaces our target hack, our energy regulators for that period of time. And since our target hack is once per minute and lasts for 20 seconds, it does sufficiently enough. And the only consideration why we might want to do that has to do with the timing of when you have to move. If you need that utility where you're constantly moving and you don't have a choice about it, you constantly have to move, then this becomes your energy management solution. Let's go through the ability tree. Off of explosive charge, line 23, we pick sequential targeting. It is the most consistent DPS there. Line 27, we do Quickdraw. Quickdraw is nice for below that 30% to give us another DPS that does more damage than charge burst. The other possibilities is dodge stance. Surrender grants dodge stance, increasing your chance to dodge melee and ranged attacks by 200% and reducing the damage you take from force and tech attacks by 75% for 3 seconds. Additionally, activating surrender resets the cooldown of Hightail. So now your surrender becomes a defensive and not just an aggro reducer, and it reduces it resets Hightail it. So Hightail is a 20-second ability, and this can be really, really effective because Hightail it allows us to potentially avoid all kinds of damage with its rolling defensive. So it can avoid quite significant amount of damage, and then we can reset it with surrender, and surrender now can be a defensive. So we really can time these as being quite defensive, and gunslingers by themselves don't necessarily have the greatest defensive, so we have to consider this. And some part of that has to do that we don't have a personal cleanse of any kind. So we just might want to consider that dodge stance is a viable potential there. The only problem is we lose that DPS. Line 39, aim assist. Your critical hit chances increase by 10% against targets affected by a shock charge. Line 43, kill streak. Critical hit damage is increased by 20%. Killing an enemy while sequence break is active resets the cooldown of target hack. So target hack activates sequence break. It's the name of the buff that we gain. Okay. Then hot head is a potential. Line 51, ballistic dampness. So while we enter cover, we have these 3 charges of ballistic dampness, and they absorb 30% of damage dealt by incoming attacks. This effect cannot occur more than once every 1.5 seconds. Ballistic dampness can only be gained once every 6 seconds. So it's like a damage reduction of 30%. If you're constantly taking damage, then you lose them. But if you once in a while take damage, they work quite effectively. Line 64, perfect scheme. Reduces the cooldown of Bag of Tricks by 45 seconds and increases the damage reduction by 15% for 15 seconds after activating Bag of Tricks. So now Bag of Tricks is a defensive, and it used to reset our Hunker Down. Hunker Down is great if we activate it if you want to avoid area effect damage. It reduces it by 60%, but not only that, it prevents us from being knocked back. And now we can use Bag of Tricks as another defensive and reset Hunker Down as an AoE attack, defensive. Okay. We do want to consider if we need to do a lot of AoE with mobs. This is a great sweeping gunfire boost. I really need to take that since we have so many AoE DPS already, but sometimes you might want to do that. Next, we do want to consider reset engagement. Surrender purges all movement impairing effects when activated and grants reset engagement, increasing your movement speed by 75% for 6 seconds. Additionally, the final shot of speed shot and penetrating round knocks back the target if they are within 10 meters. That last part is not desirable. The only reason why is if we're trying to do AoE damage, we try to keep everything tight and together. But as a movement feature, we need to consider this. For example, if I now run and I put on surrender, I have that speed boost for several seconds where I'm running 75% time, and I have it every 45 seconds. So if I really need to be able to move around, that's really great. If I'm considering the utility in this, I can ignore the last part if I'm fighting some sort of champion that's immune to movement impairing effects, because this would have no effect on it, and I can have that movement speed. And that might be very desirable on the utility of it, so just be aware of that. Next is line 68. It has two really good choices. One is scrambling field. Deploys and acquiring scrambling field that disrupts the energy signatures of conventional weapons. The field spans 10 meters around you, reducing the damage taken by all allies that remain inside by 20%. So this is a damage reduction for anybody that's inside this bubble of 20% for 20 seconds. That can be very significant, especially if the group is taking AoE damage, AoE direct damage especially. That can be really nice. The other choice is hideout. Hideout is like a memory thing where you can set a position, and if you're within 60 meters of that position, you can recall to that position instantly. The cooldown of it is 120 seconds, which is 2 minutes. It does have that long cooldown, so you have to consider it. But if you know that there's going to be a specific moment in the fight where you need to return to a position really fast, this can be a great utility. So just consider you giving up damage reduction for a movement ability. On line 73, we need to look at the two possible choices here. Goes between heads up and hot wire defense. Hot wire defense increases the amount of damage absorbed by defense screen by 30%. So your defense screen is your other defensive. In addition, while taking damage while hunkered down is active, the cooldown of Bag of Tricks is reduced by 2 seconds. This effect cannot occur only once every 3 seconds. So, while we're taking damage and we put up hunkered down, Bag of Tricks cooldown will be reduced. The other possibility is heads up. When hunkered down ends, or you leave cover while hunkered down is active, you gain heads up, which increases your movement speed by 50% and grants immunity to movement of pairing effects and lasts 6 seconds. Let's have a look at this. So let's set up hunker down. So while I've got hunker down, I leave, I get this heads up, and I've got a 50% movement speed. And hunker down is still active. I just need to get in and out again. And if you're very careful, you can actually keep it going. And then as soon as it ends, it gives it to you again. So you can use your crouch button and just move immediately right out of it and keep that movement boost going. So great utilities, great flexibility in your ability tree. You need to decide what you need to, and sometimes you need to switch it based on the fight that you're having. For most of your fights, if you're just going to be a gunning turret, these are the best choices because you have that damage reduction built in and you have ways of resetting it. So your defensive in this scenario is going to be defense screen, Bag of Tricks for AoE damage reduction. Hunkered down is going to play a role. And then you always want to keep in mind that the Shield Adrenal does a lot for you. I'm on a character that doesn't have the guild boost, so my DPS is probably going to be a little bit lower. I'm going to be not be clicking through my utilities abilities, so I'll be using the keyboard so we can just see where this is in the range of DPS. My opening sequence is going to be Bombing Run, Charge Burst, which is nice. It's one of these last 3 abilities. So I just go down there, Charge Burst, and then I flip to the opening the rest of the rotation. So that's an easy way to remember. If I have my layout like this, I can just go to the very end. One of those last 3 abilities, I start there, do both of them, and I'm in my rotation. So Bombing Run, Charge Burst, Shock Charge, and there we go. So from this combat log on the left, you'll see the ability sequence going in from the top. You will not see me opening up with Bombing Run and Charge Burst since we're not in combat yet. The first ability that will put us in combat is Shock Charge, which you'll see Shock Charge right after Charge Burst is hit. And then you'll see the sequence following. The other thing that to take note of is that I'll use Cool Head if my energy drops below 60%. I have 4 chevrons here indicating my speed at which I'm regenerating energy. If I dip just below 60%, then I'll lose 1 chevron. I won't panic yet, but if I lose a little bit too much, way beyond 60%, then I'll activate Cool Head if that is needed. This is on a character that doesn't have the alacrity boost from the guild ship. So the actions per minute was about 36.4. It's about where you should be, maybe a little bit higher with the alacrity boost. DPS around 31,000. I would say you can achieve about 30,000 reliably. Here on the Imperial side, we now have our abilities as Interrogation Probe, Targeting Systems, Explosive Probe, Series of Shots, Plasma Probe, EMP Discharge, Corrosive Dart, Fragmentation Grenade, Orbital Strike, Takedown, Snipe. Our defensives with the utilities of Augmented Shield is going to be Meticulous Preparation, Shield Probe, and AoE defensives is Entrench. We can reset our Entrench with Meticulous Preparations, and then we can have another one. Keep in mind that we should always try and have a Shield Adrenal. We can go with evasive maneuvers and turn our countermeasures into another defensive. We can also go to Seek Cover, which then whenever we leave Entrench, we have a movement speed. We can also go to Reestablish Range to turn a speed move of our countermeasures into a speed move boost. And then our opening sequence is going to be Orbital Strike, Snipe. That won't show up in this combat log, so just be aware of it. Since we're not on combat yet, so that combat entry is not tracked. We only enter combat in Interrogation Probe, so you'll see the targeting system most likely as the first. This character does have the alacrity boost from the guild ship, so we should see a small DPS increase. You can see the series of shots cooldown activation time is now much faster. We lost 2.2 seconds. As you can see, our DPS can hold above 32,000, a bit of an increase over the non-alacrity boost from the guild ship. Hope this guide was helpful, and remember to have fun.